Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Smarter Change, powered by Hassan Archer Consulting. I'm your host, Hassan Archer. Each session, we interview senior leaders to understand how they have led meaningful change inside their companies and organizations. I believe lasting change within companies requires everyone to continually assess and evaluate how they get things done in a changing world. And today, I am super excited to speak with our guest, Andi Anastasi. Andi Anastasi has worked in several facets of the reinsurance and catastrophe modeling industry for over 25 years. She has worked on both analytical and client-facing sides of the business. Hey, Andi, welcome to our show today.
Hi, Hassan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. Why don't you just start off with saying a few words about yourself for our audience today?
Hi, so I'm Andi Anastasi. I am what would nowadays be called a data translator, but over the years I've had many titles. I've worked in client-facing roles, translating technical information between my organization and clients. I've worked within organizations, translating information and causes and proper ways to do things between the sales teams and the developers. So I've always pretty much been an intermediary. For a while, I was literally an intermediary when I was a reinsurance broker. But again, same skill set, translating information, trying to speak two languages.
Sounds complicated.
Sometimes.
Yeah, but fun. So looking back on your 25 years, what would you say, really just jumping into it, what are you the most proud of that you've accomplished?
I think my proudest professional accomplishment was building the client service team at a software company. The firm published pretty complex statistical models, and our clients had a really broad range of users. So you had really technical users who knew the math and the stats, and they knew how the actual platform worked. And you had other parts of the client organization that were not as technical and didn't know it. Essentially, we had two users. We had users of the product, the software, and we had users of the IP, the information that came out of the models. And so our service team needed to be able to speak to both types of consumers at all levels of the organization, from first, second year analysts in an actuarial unit just pounded away trying to get numbers out, to chief risk officers trying to figure out where they should put capital and how they should think about the coming storm season. So putting together that team, not only was I really inspired by them, but really I enjoyed working with them. We had a pretty large team that went from first, second year risk analysts all the way to principal account managers. We worked well with our sales colleagues and really felt like we teamed up with them as well. And I think our clients felt like we were on their team, right? And pretty much any one of us could go and sit shoulder to shoulder with our clients and help them do their job on any given day.
So that's interesting. You had a very close relationship with your customers at all levels of their organization, from what I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. And you described being able to sit next to them and work shoulder to shoulder. Your customers, they were global, right? So how did that work as far as working with global customers? And also, I assume some of your team members were globally located as well.
Right. And actually, my direct manager was located in Illinois while I was located in New Jersey. So, and his boss sat in the office next door to mine. So, it was a little, here's the thing. When it comes to communication, quality is really important. Being able to speak clearly, being able to write concisely, but just as important really is quantity. Talk a lot. Be there. Like when people are remote, you don't have happenstance conversations, right? You don't happen to run into each other at a coffee machine and mention a meeting you just came out of, and that sparks a thought that somebody else has. Oh, I had a similar problem too. Or, oh, I used to work with John. He's a great guy. Whatever. You don't have those by chance conversations as much. So you need to find an alternative to that, because there's a lot of value in those interactions. Not only information, but just build a rapport, right? Like that's how you know how to talk to people. So, and this is going back, over 10 years. My first manager in RMS, he's in Illinois, I'm in New Jersey. We were kind of early adopters in video conferencing, IM, instant messaging all day long, so that if I had a random thought, I couldn't pop my head into his office, but I could tap out a quick little IM. And if he was at his desk and, had time to engage, he could. If not, I knew it was waiting for him when he did get back. We had weekly one-on-ones, which were a little more structured, where we'd send each other, usually I would kind of put together, like, here's my bullet points of things I need to talk to you about. And sometimes he would do the same, and I would organize them, but we'd start off not so much with an agenda, but with a task list, and that meeting, usually nothing was shocking at that meeting. There's nothing is right, unless something had really just come up in the last 5 minutes. That meeting was more tying everything together, making sure that things were kind of buttoned up, because we talked multiple times a day, IM, text, email, and you get used to how to interact with people. People on my team were actually all co-located with us. So my direct reports did all sit in the same building that I did. So that was helpful. But our entire development staff was actually 3,000 miles away in California. So all of the technical people were far away. So then, you can't point at stuff on a screen while someone's sitting next to you. So you have to find different ways to do that. Some video conferencing, some sending an email in advance with screenshots, back then was really helpful. Like, this is what I'm looking at and I don't understand it. Or my client sent me, sometimes you'd have to, just scan a document that a client had sent and said, my client said that somebody in our organization produced this report and I cannot for the life of me figure out what this means. Yeah. A lot of times the answer to that was, no, we didn't. Somebody else did that within your own organization and you just didn't realize it. But the perspective I take is, I know the picture bubble over my head. I want to make sure that the person I'm communicating with, whatever medium I'm using, has that picture bubble. Yeah. And so, it's an iterative process, right? Some people you click with right off the top, and some people it takes a little bit more time to build rapport or to understand the way in which they communicate. But you get there. It's not impossible, but it takes a little bit of effort and focus.
Yeah. So take me through this, because all those relationships are slightly different, right? There's you and your manager. Right. There's the fact that your manager's manager is in the same office as you. Right. And then there's the clients who may be all over the world. I know you had clients in Munich and you had developers in California. Did you have a different methodology for working with each group? And how did you decide what worked for each group?
I would say big picture, no. It's, open communication, transparency, honesty, more information is better. So in that respect, I did try to use those principles across the board. When it came down to specifics, yes, of course. Some people are more comfortable in writing, some people are more comfortable on the phone, some people are more comfortable with video. So you do tend to pick up on, I know when I talked to Barbara on the phone and followed up with a quick email with a bullet list, there's no problems. We're totally clear, because we've both had that I've had a moment to collect my thoughts. She's had a moment to double check it. Great. No problem. Other people, more formal writing is better. You just get used to that. One of the biggest challenges I faced was not just my being remote from my clients, but within my client organizations, they were sometimes decentralized. And so then you have to put on a little bit of facilitator, some days therapist maybe, for sure referee hat, just to make sure that not only is my company on the same page as that company, but within that company, they're on the same page. So it's a little bit of trial and error, to be perfectly honest. You kind of get used to how people respond well. And, early on, I realized that my manager and his manager had different communication styles. And there was also a little bit of time lag at times. And I liked and respected both of them. There was no reason for me to have any conflict. But if one of them said we were going to do X and Y in 3 days, and then 10 minutes later I heard we're doing A and B in 10 days, unless I had a very strong opinion between those two options, most of the time I was kind of indifferent to, they both made sense. They both had pros and cons. but we all have to agree. It doesn't actually matter what the answer is, we just all agree.
Yeah.
And so I was brutally honest and really transparent, like pretty early on in that process, like within the first, few weeks. Hey, this is what I heard. What do you think? This is what I heard. Lots of all of us on the same email, just clarifying. And they trusted me that there was no ulterior motive. I literally just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page. And I think they appreciated it too, because there is going to be time lag. Like if I've just gotten off the phone with my manager, but he hasn't talked to his manager since 2 days ago, and then his manager learned something yet, like, assume positive intent, right? Assume goodwill, assume good faith until proven otherwise. And then just make sure everybody's on the same page, because they don't want to misunderstand each other. Like,
yeah.
So there was no reason not to take that route. And it was hugely helpful. And sometimes it would uncover something, right? Like one of us might have outdated information. One of us might have just other information, another data point. And so by making sure that we were all kind of in sync all the time, you get the best of everything.
So proactive communication, and you referred to it took a few weeks to kind of figure this out. And you also mentioned that you had, with the general theme of open communication, honesty, authentic relationships, if I can read into what you're saying, with the people you're working with to know how they best do their work. Let's talk a little bit about the process of getting to effective communication, because there's a lot of talk in the media right now about everyone's remote and we want to get back to the new normal. So, in the short term, how do you keep your business open? And so everyone's scrambling, installing Slack, and we're installing video conferencing software to get back to, but in 2 months, we'll be good, right? When this thing goes away, we'll all be good. I don't see it as we're just going to quickly pivot back to the new normal, but I'm curious what your view is. And then for organizations, like how long should they expect this transition to take to go from this is how we did things 6 months ago to this is how we are effective going forward?
I heard somebody use the expression "the never-ending now" recently, and it really resonated with me, because I think that it's, first of all, whether the now is another 2 weeks, another 2 months, 2 years, forever, why not make it as good as you can, right? Why not do things as well as possible, as professionally as possible? So I think even if you think it's going to end soon, whatever that event horizon means to you, do it well, do a good job at it. Find out, put some best practices in place. I have a colleague that for his company, we're classmates. And so for his company, for any external meetings, they have 3 standard branded backgrounds on Zoom. So whenever you are talking to somebody outside your organization, your background is one of their 3 branded backgrounds, period. Internally, you can use whatever you want. Doesn't matter. You can leave your own background. You can put up a background within reason. So that's a standard practice they put in place pretty early on that's actually served them well. And that helps. So that may or may not work for your organization. You have to figure out what feels right for you, but then do it, live it, execute on it. It could be that regular check-ins are important. What does that check-in look like? Is it Slack? Is it do you have a daily one-on-one with your boss, almost like a Scrum style stand-up every morning? It could be something else, and you don't want to go so far. There's also been a lot of feedback, like my manager has such good intentions, doesn't want me to feel isolated and alone, but quit checking in with me. I don't have time to actually get my work done. So the pendulum can definitely swing too far in either direction. It's a different world now. When in the early days of people working remotely, either permanently, right, or because the plumber's coming that day, it was usually there's a lot of discretion on the part of any individual manager. So firms didn't necessarily, they probably had, or at least my experience was, some broad overarching policy, which pretty much said, work it out amongst yourselves, right? And so there's a lot to be said with making things work on the micro level. But again, some guiding principles are really important, and some standards are important. And as that started to evolve, where you had maybe 20% of a workforce using the 80-20 rule, 20% of your workforce is working remotely on a permanent basis, 80% are on site. Whether spoken or unspoken, onus is on the remote person to make sure that they're showing initiative, that they're, not cheating in any way, not slacking, slacking off, not slacking, because we all want to slack. I'm a big fan of that tool. And so there's and now we have this time where pretty much everybody is at home. And so there's a lot of scrambling, like you said, people just trying to, what Band-Aid, what piece of bubble gum and twine can I get to make this work for today? And then going forward, my prediction is that in the long run, it'll probably be more like 20-80, 20% on site, 80% working remotely. And so again, the onus is always on the employee to demonstrate to the manager that you do your job. Like at some level, that's just kind of how the world works. But you don't want to be so concerned with output and demonstrating that you've done something that you lose sight of outcomes and doing the right thing. So find that balance for you that's not just busy work, right? But is also, you do need to memorialize stuff, right? Like you do need to have some artifacts of work product, if only for your own self, only so that, 2 weeks from now, Andi will be super happy today, Andi jotted down those notes. And so again, for each organization, for the type of work you do, find what is helpful. Processes should serve work, not the other way around. Work is not there to fit into a process. The process should always add value to whatever you're trying to accomplish, which has value to your clients.
Yeah. So looking at processes should serve work as opposed to work should serve a process. Do you think companies should change their expectations of their employees in this time, or should they keep the same goals and just say, okay, well, the work is the same, the result's the same, now we just need to figure out how to change the processes?
Yes, to some degree, they should have the same standards in terms of their work product, right?
Okay.
Like that should be the same. You should still expect that your employees are going to speak professionally to one another and to their clients, that there's, good manners, that sort of thing. Should companies care if their employees work from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then take a break for 3 hours? Companies are going to have to figure out what that is. If you need somebody to be present and on call during certain hours, that doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
But if you need your employees to produce some object, some type of work, some negative work by a certain deadline, you probably shouldn't care what hours they're doing that in, right? If you have people who think really well between 3 p.m. and 10 p.m., fine. Like, as long as they get you that document you requested by 9 a.m. the next day, do you really care when they hit the send button? One of my philosophies when I was a manager, and I would explicitly say this to people who are directly reporting me, was like, don't make me nickel. I don't want to nickel and dime you. Don't nickel and dime me. Like, if you need to go to the dentist, I want you to go to the dentist, right? I don't want to notice when you're coming in and when you're leaving for the day. Don't make me notice that stuff. And by and large, it's fine. People appreciated that. Like, life happens and you need a little flexibility. And the goodwill you build up, like, every time you've said you were going to deliver something, you delivered it. I don't care if you took 45 minutes for lunch or 2 hours, because I know I'm going to get what I need from you.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, you have to get to that point where you have, trust, and you've built up rapport and all of that. So I think it's perfectly acceptable in the beginning of an interaction, like the first time somebody starts with a company, that there's going to be a trial period, right? Where you kind of figure out what works. And again, setting expectations. As a manager, it's not only your luxury, but it's your responsibility to your employee to set expectations. It's not fair to tell somebody that you're going to at some point judge them and not tell them what the criteria is.
Yes.
And now, if you're someone who, as a manager, you again need to be able to get somebody all the time, find out what that is. Like, do you really need somebody to be on call at their computer without break from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.? Okay, but even in an office space, that's not necessarily going to be realistic. maybe it's that if I ping you, I need during work hours, not lunch hour, you're going to get back to me within 15 minutes. Maybe that's acceptable, maybe that's not. Again, it depends on the culture of an organization, the individuals involved, the work. Don't be overly pedantic, but be straightforward,
Mm-hmm.
And, again, it would be great if I could say, here's the 10 golden rules of how you work remotely, and one size fits all. And that's just not the case. I think, again, there's some guiding principles: respect, quality communication, quantity communication, and transparency, right? Transparency of expectations, of work, of all of those things.
Yeah, one of the things I've heard a lot about from both executives and employees is there's this fear factor that is, as an owner of a company, how do I know that my people are doing what I need them to do? So that in 6 months, when the project is supposed to release, we won't have this huge, oh my goodness moment. Someone totally made the screen blue and it should have been red, just to simplify an example.
Yeah.
And so that causes a lot of founders and executives to, they want to trust, but they want to verify, and they go really far in the verify direction to end up with almost a micromanaging kind of attitude, which then actually turns off the employees, which causes them to disengage from their work, which can actually lead to the thing that the executive was trying to avoid.
Right.
And, the employees, if you read online, you hear them complaining about, oh my gosh, my manager is just pinging me every half hour on Slack to see what I'm up to. And, it wasn't like this before. I mean, it's just like, that's just really challenging for people to adapt to this.
Yeah.
And I don't know, is there a silver bullet to this, or is it just we have to push through and figure it out?
I would say, having been on both sides of that sort of conundrum, as a manager, if somebody tells me something before I need to know it, that makes me really happy, right? Like, and I would say the most important time is when things aren't great. Like, if somebody surprises me and says, oh no, that was totally done and it was filed and everyone's happy, great, like excellent. That is not a problem to be solved. But if you think, don't ever hide bad news, right? Even if it's just a heads up, I don't need you to do anything for me yet, manager, but I need you to know that this is not as smooth as we anticipated. Sometimes, and just to go back to your original premise, those concerns that managers have, they've always had those concerns, even when the whole team was 10 feet away, right? Unless they're literally creepily hovering over them, over their shoulder, they still don't know. So I would say, find a cadence, it could be, hey, every morning we do a quick 10-minute check-in. This is my plan for the day. And at the end of the day, it's a quick, Slack message or email with 2 or 3 bullet points, like, got through 5 things on the task list, didn't get to these other 2. Things are going much faster on this stream of work. It just found out that the vendor lost 4 of their people, so we're not getting that input we needed. So that's going to be delayed. I'm a big fan of lists and bullet points for myself, and I think as a means of communication. So again, what works for you guys? It could be demonstrating, like if you're putting together some sort of user interface, it could be that every morning you check in for 5 minutes and pull it up and say, this is what it looks like. Is this what you expected? Is this what you expected the front end to do? But yeah, check-ins are great. And I think if they're also done on a timed basis, on an expected scheduled basis, tempers and temperatures can also be lower, right? If I know every Wednesday morning I'm going to show my manager what I've accomplished so far, I can manage to that. Most people, if you give them a boundary within to work brilliantly and beautifully, and they maximize and they're very efficient within their boundary. It's the unknowns and uncertainty that can be really inefficient and cause a lot of friction. So if you can minimize those, and managers too, like if something's changing, if you're starting to get a whiff that like all of a sudden requirements are going to change, but you don't know for sure, let the team know. Say, hey, we need to stay the path that we're on now. Just know, right, that at some point we might have to redo some things. And people understand working on an iterative process, right? If I know, oh, this is what I'm doing now, and then there's going to be a version 2, a version 3, a version 4, a version 5, then I'm fine, right? But if I think I've been given a set of specs and that's it, and that's going to be the product, and then it comes back with edits, I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me this before, right?
Yeah.
And I'm super clear on that whenever I'm managing people, that if I think something's going to be iterative, I tell them, like, you do the best you can, and when you come back, we're both going to look at it with fresh eyes, and there's going to be another version. And they appreciate that. No one's ever said that. And when work gets really close to being done and it's really, really good, the comments get really, really picky. And I found that most people, if you say to them, I have some feedback and it's super picky, they understand that, right? Like you're right at the finish line. So yes, this is going to be really small stuff. So good, kudos to you. Like, the reason you get this kind of annoying feedback is because you've done so much good work, right? Yeah. And I think most people appreciate that. Conversely, if you get new information and you're giving a new directive to an employee, tell them it's new information. No one minds hearing that. No one minds hearing, like, things changed. You're telling me about a change. Let's do that. But if you present it as somehow criticism, then people feel like, wait a minute, but that's not what you told me. You told me to do it with a red background. Now you're saying red background is wrong. It should be green. Well, now change that conversation to the manager coming to you and say, red background looks great. Just talk to Bob over in sales. Got to do a green background. Oh, well, now we're in it together. Now it's the two of us taking on a challenge, right? Same work, changing the background, totally different dynamic. And, I've worked with people in the past who, it was a criticism first, and then you ask a few background questions, and you find out, oh, it's not wrong. It just needs to be updated, right? Again, but then it's a little, you're taking a little bit out of the goodwill column, right? I think of some of those ways of interacting with people as like the motor oil of an engine, right? Say please and thank you a lot, because one day you're going to be in a bad mood or you're going to be stressed for time, and you want the people that you work with to think, oh, something bad must have happened. I hope she's okay. Not like, oh yeah, there's a person who never says please or thank you, So again, it goes back to that principle of transparency and quantity of communication.
Yeah, which is even more important now, because you don't have necessarily repeat interactions by the water cooler to build that rapport, right? If you only talk to somebody once a day in the morning for 10 minutes on a Slack channel or a video call, and then something goes off the rails, you don't have that relational capital built up, which is, which gives you space to have grace so that you can say, oops, look, we messed up. I really like what you said about being honest with people about, hey, this is new information. And then it's not trying to hide something and trying to say, oh, well, why didn't you know it should be green? Where were you? It's, hey, we just found this piece of information. And that allows us to keep an iterative process to get products out the door with everybody on board with change, as opposed to, well, I was under the impression this wasn't going to change, and now everything's changing, so let me just, throw my hands up in the air and run out screaming. So that's something that I think companies can take advantage of right now, because we're forced to change. Everybody has had to change their business. Some companies have done really well with the change. It's brought in a bunch of new work. Some companies have really struggled to stay in business. What would you say companies that have successfully adopted the changes, right, to have their business be functional remote with the changing dynamics of customers, what should they keep? So as the world's changing, I mean, it's going to be continuous change going forward as we try to say, how do we reopen up? But what should they keep and what should they stop?
Yeah, I think companies that are really good at knowing what they do and what their value is to their customers and can articulate that independent of a setting, independent of the tools that they use, will do well, right? If they understand their fundamentals and what their value proposition is, the how of delivering that will always change, right? Like it should be different than how you did it 10 years ago or 10 months ago. If you understand what your value is and appreciate that value gets delivered differently over time as the world evolves, as tools evolves, as practices evolve, I think you'll be fine, right? And also understand what your culture is and what you want it to be. Is it cheerful disagreement? Like, does your culture foster like spirited debates? Great. Like, I had a manager years ago who loved to like whiteboard stuff out and tell me I was wrong and da-da. And if you walked by us, you would think that we were like about 5 minutes from like being hauled into HR for some sort of like, disagreement. But then he'd go, hey, let's go. I saw a New Deli on the corner. Let's go get lunch. And we go get lunch, right? Because he always framed it as the two of us against a problem. And so he loves spirited debate and I love it, right? Not everybody loves that. And you have to know what it is, right? Assault and boxing are not the same thing, but they might look the same on the outside, right? So make sure everybody's involved. And if that doesn't work for your team, having everybody be very buttoned up, like you feel like no one's ever, foster some spirited debate. If you realize that the spirited debate really doesn't bring out the best in people because the shy people don't want to say anything and the loud people aren't hearing, find what works, right? And so again, know what your value is and know what your company is and how you can do it. And you should be fine, right? Unless there's something that your value is like not allowed anymore, right? If your value proposition is that you have the best atmosphere of any restaurant in the city right now, that's not going to help you. So
not going to help you. No, not at all.
Right.
Yeah. So, the idea of this change we forced ourselves into with remote work has opened up the possibility for us to step back and say, okay, if we have to clear the decks and figure this whole thing out, we had the chance to stop doing some stuff that maybe before COVID would have been really difficult to stop. How would you suggest companies think about what they want to stop? Because sometimes a company starts this process of momentum, right? We've done things this way forever, and so we'll just keep doing it. But there's really an opportunity now to step back and say, look, COVID's given us permission to ask the questions and have the hard conversations. What would you suggest for companies to take advantage of in this time of change and turmoil?
Yeah. Be really explicit about what that thing is you want to stop or start, right? To take a really easy example, if you feel like there's too many formal meetings, but not enough real collaboration, figure out what that means. Does that mean that you foster a lot of one-on-one teleconferences? And a lot of your old big meetings are instead of having giant staff meetings where there's 15 people in a room telling the rest of the room what their status is, maybe that should be a document that's shared and everybody can just reference, right? Maybe that's a dashboard that gets updated. If you're worried that there's too many silos happening, not for ill intent or ill will or nefarious purposes, but just because people are so head down on what they're trying to do, the only people they talk to or interact with at all are the people who are absolutely working on the same micro problem that they are, well, then maybe you need to have some big Zoom meetings, right? With an agenda and some facilitation to bring everyone out. And it could be lighthearted, right? It could be some, fun Q&A, something that replicates more of the casual interactions you might have in your office. I was talking to a former colleague who said that they've started doing that at her company, that every 2 weeks they have a happy hour, but it's pretty structured. So everyone's on Zoom. They've rotated who's a facilitator, and they've done everything from, ask a funny question in advance and then throw out the answer and people have to guess who had a Raggedy Ann doll when they were 5, whatever it is, and it's helped kind of get people to sort of take a deep breath and remember that their coworkers are also like friendly acquaintances as well. So you have to, again, it's all specific to what your needs are. Be a little wary of solutions that go looking for problems. Just because like this bi-weekly facilitated structured happy hour worked well for this company, it might not work for yours, right? Your people might be like, oh God, that's 2 hours I could have gotten that one JIRA ticket done. Like, then that's not for you. So I think that there are probably some inefficiencies that have lasted a long time that, could definitely get done. Some of them I suspect will just organically wither away. But be mindful of it. And I think you have to, I've talked to a few companies over the last few months that are very aware of culture and the importance of culture. My belief is that culture is always the dependent variable, right? You change your practices, you change your people, you change your style, you change your expectations, and all of that produces your culture. Now, but not to say you can't still be highly focused on what your culture is, right? And that can drive, like, I know I want to get to here. I have to drive these practices. So, maybe you need to change your organizational structure, right? Like maybe the flat organizational structure that was great when everybody was co-located, right? Because it was super democratic, small d democratic, and everybody could talk to whoever they needed to get the information they, to do a better job. And that was great because people ran into each other at the coffee machine, or there were, socials or whatever. That flat organization might not work in a totally remote workforce, right? You might need to put people into some smaller units so that they don't feel kind of lost in the shuffle, they don't feel isolated. And also be mindful of the fact that like some of your people working remotely have a lot of activity going on around them, right? They may be also teaching third grade to their children. They may also be caring for an aging parent. They may have 5 roommates if they're younger, right? And some other people totally solo, right? So, you might have 2 people who do the same job, and one of them is alone in their home all day, and the other one can barely get 2 seconds of silence because of everything else. Those 2 employees need different things from you as a manager. They both need your understanding, right? And they both need you to set expectations clearly. But you will help them in different ways. And it's okay. It's totally okay to say to employee 1 that's got an extra 4 people in their household and is trying to, whatever. I'll tell you when stuff is due. You do it whenever you want, right? And then to, another person saying like, no, I do want to talk to you twice a day. Like I do want to meet with you in the morning and the afternoon. Like not to take, not because I don't trust you, but because I think you need some casual interaction as well. So
Andi, this has been really good. There's so much wisdom and help that you've given us today in this podcast, and I'm sure that our listeners will find a lot here that applies to their direct situation. As we exit here today, what's next for you, Andi? What's on the horizon for you? I know you just finished up a master's program. Do you want to say a little bit about that and kind of where you're heading in the future?
Sure. Yeah, I'm 8 weeks away from that. We're in the final stretch of the capstone project. I'm doing an applied analytics master's through Columbia as part of their first and only San Francisco cohort. So the next step will probably be a role that, again, combines the client-facing stuff I like, the soft skills that are needed, and an analytical role. So looking around, looking for some short-term projects as well. So we'll see what comes next.
Okay, awesome. So people who enjoyed our conversation today and just want to find out more about you or your thoughts on this and how you could help them, how could they best contact you?
The best way to contact me is through LinkedIn, Andi Anastasi, ANDI, and shoot me a note and I'd love to connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andi. And for everyone who's listening today, thanks for joining us for this conversation. We look forward to hearing your comments and your feedback, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Hassan. Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.